Welcome to the 2020 Women's Month celebration. My name is Romy Titus and I'll be your host for this prestigious event. As a norm, the 9th of August means commemoration of Women's Day in South Africa. And for 2020, this is going to be a virtual affair. The pandemic has thrown us in the deep end while advancing and engaging more with technology. It's been 64 years, 64, since a woman marched to the union buildings against the past laws that deemed Black people substandard citizens in their country. This year, we commemorate this act with the following theme: generation equality, realizing women's rights for an equal future. We kickstart the program with Gert Sibande and Mpumalanga Choral Ensemble singing the African Union Anthem, to be followed by the South African National Anthem.
Let us all unite and celebrate together the victories won for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Let us all unite and sing together to uphold the bonds that frame our destiny, our destiny. Let us dedicate ourselves to fight together for lasting peace and justice on earth. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Let us all unite and toil together to give the best we have to Africa. The cradle of mankind and font of culture, our pride and hope and break of dawn. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Usisigeleni Africa, malupaganiso kondalaya, izwa imithandazo yethu. Nkosi, sigelela thina, lusapho lwayo, murena buluka sitshaba sayesu, ufedisele intoli mathwenye. Usibuluke, usibuluke sitshaba sayesu, sitshaba sa South Africa, South Africa. And die Bloven onze Jämmer, and die Diebte von uns jet. Uns verwertes, wann die Grenze anwolken, sonst come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and stand for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Wow, thank you so much, Gert and the ensemble, for that lovely performance. I'm sure you'll agree with me that anthems always seem to move something in one's soul, and it always leaves me feeling nostalgic in a way. I don't know about you, but I'm sure in the spirit of celebrating Women's Month now, it's time to receive the official opening remarks from the Premier of Mpumalanga, Ms. Rifilwe Mtsweni Tsipane.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a singular honor and privilege to address you as we pay homage to Imbokodo. Today, we join the rest of the nation in saluting all our unsung heroines who taught us the true meaning of courage, sacrifice, and determination in pursuit of the noble goal of political and socio-economic equality. This year, we commemorate 64 years since our gallant heroines such as Umama Helen Joseph, Umama Lilian Goyi, Umama Rahima Musa, Umama Sophia Williams, and many more women stood up against the oppressive system of apartheid. The 20,000 women who gathered in Pretoria on the 9th of August in 1956 proved through words and, more importantly, through actions that watinta bafazi, watinta imbokodo. We commemorate the heroines of 1956 and seek to draw strength and inspiration from their deeds as we confront the scourge of gender-based violence, which is a blight not only to their legacies, but also to the rainbow nation envisaged by the architects of our Constitution. As women, we live with the daily knowledge that no space is safe for us because of this scourge. We urge women and society as a whole to partake in our initiative to ensure that there is no safe place for perpetrators of gender-based violence. We urge survivors and anyone who is aware of ongoing cases of gender-based violence to report them to the toll-free gender-based violence hotline on 0800 428 428. It is our collective responsibility to end the scourge of gender-based violence, and in recognition of this fact, the Mpumalanga provincial government will continue to work with stakeholders from all sectors to ensure that we create safer communities for our women and children. It is indeed an affront to the legacies of Omama Charlotte Maxeke and Albertina Sisulu to find women occupying a low percentage of senior managerial positions in Mpumalanga. For example, women occupy 36.4% of senior managerial position in the provincial administration. My commitment is to implement gender parity during the course of this administration. We have started this process and have ensured that the female occupy 50% of accounting officer roles within the provincial government. There is a long journey ahead of us, but as Lao Tzu once remarked, and I quote, open quote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step," close quote. Ladies and gentlemen, we must also acknowledge the fact that the women are disproportionately affected by unforeseeable pandemics such as COVID-19 pandemic. The state of disaster declared by His Excellency, the President of the Republic, did slow the spread of the pandemic and flattened the curve. However, we must also acknowledge that the imposition of the lockdown has affected the livelihood of millions of women in both the formal and informal sectors. To this effect, and in an effort to empower women and address the legacies of economic oppression, the Mpumalanga provincial government will prioritize the extension of strategic support to youth and women-owned SMMEs. We will do this by expanding our initiatives in the agricultural economy, by extending support and prioritizing funding to female-owned commercial farming enterprises through the Fortune 40 Incubation Program. Through these initiatives, we will expedite the development of young and female entrepreneurs within the agricultural sphere. Furthermore, through Youth Development Fund that we have established with a 50 million endowment, we will prioritize female-owned enterprises when evaluating entities to which funding and strategic support will be granted. Ladies and gentlemen, we are fully aware of the magnitude of the task bestowed upon our generation of leaders in striving for gender parity whilst ensuring the safety of our women and children. But vested in all of us in the fortitude of Umama Winnie Madikizela Mandela and the indomitable spirit of Nokuthula Simelane, it is our responsibility to ensure that their sacrifices were not in vain. Now more than ever, we must personify the adage that Mosadi Utshwara Thipa ka bohaleng. We must endeavor to be the change we wish to see in the world. That means that we must be central to any discourse and affirm the position that dictates that nothing about us without us. As we honor our strong women, may we strive to know them, to be them, and to raise them. With this being said, I wish to join the millions of South Africans and wish our women a happy Women's Day. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Premier Mtsweni Tsipane, for the opening remarks. We shall receive messages of support from our esteemed ministers, starting with the Minister of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, Mayor Maita Nkwane Mashabane. A message will then be followed by Minister Nathi Mthethwa from Sports, Arts and Culture.
Program Director, Your Excellency Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Mr. Nathi Mthethwa, Honorable Premier of Mpumalanga Province, Ms. Refilwe Mtsweni Tsipane, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans, I'm pleased to join you as we celebrate National Women's Day 2020 under the theme Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Rights for an Equal Future. This year, we celebrate this important day under difficult circumstances due to COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, while the generation of 1956 faced different challenges under the apartheid system and colonization, the current generation is confronted with similar challenges under different circumstances. These include patriarchy, poverty, gender-based violence, and more. Despite progress made in achieving women empowerment in the last 26 years, challenges remain. Gender-based violence and femicide continues to be a shame to our nation. Our clarion call to all South Africans is to do their part to end gender discrimination and gender-based violence and femicide. We demand justice and harsh sentences for the perpetrators of gender-based violence and femicide. Fellow South Africans, we need to redouble our efforts to promote economic and financial inclusion of women. There cannot be total emancipation of women without the full participation of women in our country. We also need to reclaim our space internationally, and working together, we will achieve this. Let us rally behind our women, girls, and women with disabilities to advance their rights in their political, economic, social, cultural spheres. Let us join hands and say no to patriarchy, gender-based violence, and femicide, and economic exclusion of women. Let's invest in women entrepreneurship to grow our country's economy. We need to support the continued strengthening and further development of women's capacity in leadership, management, ownership, and entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, let us use this year's commemoration to recommit our country to a society where boys and girls, men and women, young and the elderly, and everyone is free to walk everywhere in our country. Happy Women's Day. Malibongwe.
Program Director, His Excellency President of the Republic, President Ramaphosa, Minister in the Presidency, Minister Nkwana Mashabane, Deputy Minister Mkhize, Ministers and Deputy Ministers here present, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, fellow South Africans, I extend my warmest greetings to all of you. The circumstances of our day, the challenges of our time forces us to gather in a manner we did not anticipate this year or this time last year. The whole world has been turned upside down by the challenges of coronavirus pandemic. However, the resilience of humanity will conquer this challenge. In order for us to do so, we need to observe all the health protocols by the World Health Organization. We have gathered here this morning to celebrate Women's Day under the theme Realizing Women's Rights for an Equal Future, which is embedded within the Global Generation Equality Campaign, as well as the contextual factors in our country. Women's Day 2020 takes place in the context of dual pandemics of COVID-19 and gender-based violence and femicide, which has underlined the urgent need to more decisively deal with the legacy of structural oppression to accelerate the transformation of our society. This includes the transformation of unequal power relations between women and men and addressing gender oppression, patriarchy, sexism, racism, ageism, and to create an environment which enables women to take full control of their lives, reach their full potential, and contribute to the country's development. In the past few months, the violent incidents directed against women of our country demonstrate a barbaric nature of some amongst us. In the words of Women's Charter, adopted in 1954 under the clause Test of Civilization, the level of civilization which any society has reached can be measured by the degree of freedom that its members enjoy. The status of women is a test of civilization. Measured by that standard, South Africa must be considered low in the scale of civilized nation, close quote. We should double our efforts to build a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society in which women are guaranteed their rights as full human beings. Thank you for your attention.
I'll introduce myself again. I am Romy Titus, and it is an honor to be tasked with moderating the commemoration and celebrating the Mbokodos of South Africa. This year's theme is Generations Equality, realizing women's rights for an equal future. As a nation, we shall never forget the sacrifice made by our mothers on this day in August 1956, when amidst precarious environment, they took to the streets marching against the degrading past laws imposed by the apartheid regime. Those are the women who showed us the way and instilled in us the importance of standing against injustice. It is against this backdrop that today, South Africa observes both international and regional human rights frameworks and have domesticated these instruments into our constitution. As a country, we've not just ratified human rights treaties, but we are following through with obligations. However, the key question remains, are we indeed realizing women's rights for an equal future? At this juncture, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Minister of Sports, Arts and Recreation, Ms. Notawe Mafu, who shall deliver to us keynote address towards the end of the program. I'm certain we all cannot wait to hear how she will address the theme of generation equality and particularly on realizing women's rights for an equal future. At this juncture, I'd like to introduce Meg Gertrude Shope to deliver a message on women, peace and security.
Your Excellency President Ramaphosa, Minister in the Presidency, Maite Nkwana Mashabane, distinguished guests and fellow South Africans, thank you for giving me this great honor to salute and greet all of the women of our country in their diversity on this National Women's Day. Thanks to the struggles of yesterday, today we look with pride at many women playing leadership roles that we could not even imagine in our days. We also take this moment to thank the men and women of Africa and the world who supported our struggles in diverse ways and for many years. Thank you for the important roles played by different women in the new struggles against COVID-19. The COVID-19 has increased the incidences of gender-based violence, which was already unacceptably high. It has also made the life of people living with disabilities more difficult. Thanks to our president, government, civil society, and women in communities who are addressing these challenges. Our deepest condolences go to the loved ones of those who lost their lives in the new battle. Finally, congratulations to the Ahmed Kathrada and Sophie Dubrain Foundations for the project to recognize more of the women of the 1956 march to the Union buildings. On my part, I will be adding to the 2 Malibongwe booklets that recognize different women who played a role in support of our democracy. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shope, for your enlightening message. As I highlighted earlier, I'll be moderating this virtual program, which involves a panel discussion. I'm joined in studio by outstanding South African women who will today engage the nation on women-centered issues. I would love to welcome and introduce to you our esteemed panelists, whose discussions will inform the President's address at a later stage during the program. With me today, I have Ms. Nomasonto Mazibuko, who will talk to disability rights, including persons with albinism. I have Ms. Masutane Mojaji from the South African Federation for Mental Health, and she'll address the impact of COVID-19 on women's mental health. The moderator today is Deputy Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize, looking beautiful in green. We want to commemorate, we want to celebrate, but we have to dig deep. And we're digging deep today as we talk about mental health, especially in the times that we're facing with COVID-19. Ms. Masutane Mojaji, I'm sure that the SA Federation for Mental Health has been inundated, especially in a time like this.
Thank you, Romy, and definitely, yes. We are living in unique times where everybody is just overwhelmed by the impacts of the COVID-19, especially on their mental well-being. So this has not only affected people with pre-existing disabilities, all of us, because we are affected by the pandemic, we are one way or another impacted mentally. That being said, we are encouraging communities to do what they can to look after their mental well-being during this time, check up on people who are experiencing mental health problems. There was a global study that was conducted by the United Nations Population Fund in 2018, and that study found that women with disabilities, and I'm speaking disabilities in general, including psychosocial and intellectual disabilities, are 10 times more likely to experience domestic violence, gender-based violence, unlike women without any disabilities.
Is it more so during this time, or are these stats continuously on the rise, regardless of the pandemic?
I think in South Africa, we've seen that, during the early stages of the lockdown that started in March, there were already shelters that were reporting that they're experiencing an influx of women who are seeking shelters as a result. GBV in itself is a social risk for developing a mental health problem. So it's important that whatever information and services are available for mental health are available and accessible to women in shelters. That being said, again, we as the South African Federation for Mental Health, we work with 17 mental health societies. They are providing direct services to communities, and they've been working consistently to provide an excellent model of mental health services in the communities.
I mean, she said a mouthful there, Ms. Mojaji, in terms of just overstretched during this time. But I love also what she said is, we don't check in with each other. How are you doing? DM, how are you doing?
I'm good. Would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for introducing us to such an important issue. I'm just interested in gender equality aspects of it. Do you think girls and women suffer more from mental health problems as they tend to be caregivers and they do more, they check on other people?
Absolutely, Deputy Minister. I think girls and women, especially in the rural areas, are more as vulnerability is increased because of social factors such as domestic violence as well at home, poverty, ill health. This increases their likelihood of developing mental health problems as a result. And this is one of the things that was mentioned in a government document, the National Mental Health Policy Framework and Strategic Plan 2013 to 2020. It comes to an end this year, so we need to reflect on that. But what it flagged and identified was the need to improve equitable allocation of resources and also just increase access to mental health services so that these women, especially those who find themselves in rural areas, can have an ongoing access to mental health services when they need and they know where to go. And this is an area where we are hoping government will be able to lead us in terms of like policy development and implementation and coordinating consultations across sectors. We're hoping government will be able to lead us with that so that we can at least have an equal allocation of resources so that women also are able to access this as and when they need.
Very, very important.
Yeah, you know, just a quick one for me. I mean, I'm sitting Kanyamazane. You know, I have Gogo Mang, who is Isangoma. I have a woman of Umanyano. How do we ensure that those community resources are able to assist vulnerable people within a community?
Definitely, we have community-based organizations, non-governmental, that are providing excellent services and are available to assist, but then they lack the capacity, they lack the resources, and then they lack also even the information and the support. And I think this is an area that also needs to be strengthened and that we offer them the support so that they are able to provide this kind of services, mental health services, to this woman in Kanyamazane who's looking for that at a place closer to where she lives or where she works.
There's some really great work being done on the ground. It is said that 1 in 6 South Africans are affected by mental illness in some way or form. Let's hear now from Ms. Nomasonto Mazibuko, disability rights, including persons with albinism.
Thank you very much. And I would say it is a pleasure to be on the same panel with the Deputy Minister who has been appointed to be our champion. And that it means she will need more education. Let me speak about albinism. Albinism is a condition where people with albinism have different kinds of the skin and they are visually impaired. But the point that I want to put across is that both parents who don't have albinism are not aware why they get this child with albinism, where you find now the woman is blamed for bringing this curse into the family. The woman is blamed to have slept with a person who is not the right partner or the husband. So women with albinism suffer in silence. I'm happy she's speaking of Wanyamaza. The woman in Wanyamazana is suffering in silence. Inequality in this country is not only on women. As we speak COVID-19, we don't know if the sanitizers were manufactured with the thought of people with albinism. Our skin is sensitive. We were together with the Deputy Minister launching the voices of visually impaired and blind women. Those women are not looked after, even if when they go and report GBV, the people in the police station still want to know if we are socially and physically involved in sexual activities. Why are we looked as if we are objects and not people? We're happy to be South Africans. Can our voices be heard? Can we work together? Minister, we want to work with you. We don't want to be an afterthought to say, by the way, this policy speaks about women. What about women with disabilities? We would like to make the president aware that as he is chairing the AU, people with albinism need to be protected in whatever that you are going to achieve, because we killed as girl children and women in Africa. And we're saying, can we unite in putting across that people with albinism, their body parts do not have any muti, and we don't have extra power to give you luck as you're moderating this panel today.
I think you raise a good point there, Ms. Mazibuko, as a person living with albinism, that I think it's more, Deputy Minister, of a woman being differently abled as opposed to disabled.
Yeah, I think we have to maybe go back to our commissioner there, Mazibuko, in terms of really how do we ensure that younger women today are prepared to speak out, are prepared to record their experiences of marginalization, of being treated differently, long even before they disappear from communities, long before even they are attacked.
The theme of the United Nations says, bridging the generation gap. I think as we sit here as older women, we have seen how older women have looked down on younger women. Let me cite the issue of divorce. When a young woman gets married, it is the older person who says, your place at the home is now finished. You belong to them kids as a Mazibuko, and we don't expect you back. And when this young woman, the marriage doesn't work, it is the very older woman who ridicules the young women. I heard you speak about the Sangoma and the church. The church doesn't allow young women to come into Manyano and say, I didn't make it in this marriage, so can I be accepted? I think it is this year that we are going to have action and speak to all those areas that are very sensitive of a woman who has a disability, of a woman who has albinism, to be accepted fully and not be thought about. And what is very difficult is the mental health that is not looked after. How many of us, as she has said, have we checked on one another since COVID?
Ms. Mazibuko raises really good points, and I think, Deputy Minister, there's also a tapestry here. There's such links, especially between mental awareness. We're talking about disability, but it's the same. I love how the Commissioner said that the Deputy Minister, you are the champion. You're the champion for women, for children. Is the load you bear, is it overbearing, or do you feel you are the champion, you are the difference, you are the agent of change?
I see all of us as agents of change. We can no longer drag the discussion and say people should continue to disappear, to be discriminated against, to be attacked. The question is, how do we ensure that within the next 5 to 10 years, we see concrete results whereby a person's rights are realized and respected by all? It's a burden upon all of us, the system as a whole, that, for instance, when Commissioner Mazibuko mentions the kind of sanitizers that are suitable for sensitive skins, so I could see a coalition also with manufacturers. So the needs of persons with disability or people with albinism, they are not limited to the rights only, but we have to look at manufacturing, we have to look at power, economic inclusion, we have to look at energy issues, and so it broadens the space which we should occupy. You know, the point I was interested in also from Ms. Mazibuko is a question of the criminal justice system. Because really, at the end of the day, we all say, when we think about government, you think about the police, the courts, and so on. What do you think we should do to empower the police in such a way that women who come to the police station are not asked the same questions, secondary victimization, in terms of how certain are you that this person did that to you? Because that must be devastating for women.
Yes, Deputy Minister, the first thing is to employ people with disabilities themselves. SAPS has integrated, there is a unit that is called vulnerable groups, but most of the police stations don't have the designated rooms for people who have been abused. If I come as a deaf person, there must be a sign language interpreter. Always saying, let's work together. Policies are there. We don't want to be reading, they are gathering dust. As we speak right now, policies need us to go and implement. It is the time for government to implement. Government cannot implement by its own. It's going to implement with us.
Commissioner, I love what you said. It doesn't just fall on the Deputy Minister, but collectively, we as women of South Africa standing together to be those change agents. If you take a look at worldwide statistics, 400 million people are affected by mental illness. And if you take a look at the stats of GBV, only 1 in 9 cases goes reported. Due to COVID-19, we would have loved to have a huge panel discussion, keeping our social distances with no masks in order for you to be able to hear us. When we come back, our next panelists join us. This time, Judy Nokwedi talks about money within a household and how women drive the economy, however, still earn less than men. And a GBV survivor talks about how she lives and breathes today, and GBV, how it's affected her life. We continue to commemorate Women's Day this Sunday right here. And albeit different due to COVID-19, we'd like to thank Ms. Mazibuko as well as Ms. Mujaji for their insights shared. Joining our panel now is Judy Nokwedi, talking about women, economic empowerment and financial inclusion. She's the SG at the Black Business Council. And after that, we will be joined virtually by our gender-based violence activist and survivor as she shares her story. Deputy Minister Hlengiwe Mkhize is still here with us. Judy, a warm welcome to the panel. It's really good to have you in your bright, vibrant yellow. Happy Women's Day. Do I say a happy Women's Day? Can we use the word happy? If you take a look at, yes, the strides we've made, but that there's still so much that needs to be done, especially from an economic empowerment front.
There is nothing happy for women in South Africa. We've not been happy for many, many years. And the gains that we've made since the Beijing meeting 25 years ago, we've seen a gradual erosion year on year when it comes to the economic status of women, especially in the area of empowerment and financial inclusion. So I want to share a very little quick story with you, and I dedicate the story to Ntombi. It is her story. A grandmother is teaching a child about life. And she says, there is a terrible fight going on inside of me, and it is between 2 wolves, a good wolf and a bad wolf. And the grandchild looks up at Gogo and says, Gogo, which wolf wins? And the grandmother, the Gogo, says, it is the one you feed. So a few days ago, I bumped into Ntombi. She's been working in a business in my neighborhood for more than 20 years. She's a young woman who always has a radiant smile, a sort of up-tempo beat. She was withdrawn, she was sad, and she was totally depressed, in a total state of despair. There are 20 women who work in this business, and it's a sector where women, dominated by women. And she says only 10 of them are allowed to work at a time. She does not know how she's going to pay her rent moving forward. She does not know how she is going to feed her children. She's always worked in the informal sector in Dobsonville to supplement her income. And she has identified a fantastic business opportunity, a niche product that has a huge market in the township. She needs money to start the business. And she said, Wena, Judy, you are with the Black Business Council. I hear on the radio all the time that there are funds for women. How do I access money? So we at the Black Business Council, in the women's formation, the Women's Alliance, we have a very, very clear vision around how you protect women. It is this simple. You put cash in the hands of women, you protect women. Black women do not have credit. They don't have access to savings. They do not have trust funds, and they don't have investments. So it is important that we have access to markets, that we have access to funding and finance, and very, very importantly, if women do not have land and they don't have title deed, then they are left to the vagaries and to the prey of men who demand transactional sex, and they become subjects of gender-based violence. So we as the Black Business Council are very clear, put cash in the hands of women. And we want a South African economy that is led by Black business-owned women, small, medium, and large.
It's a beautiful story that you tell, especially of you being a beacon of hope for Ntombi, where she went for those resources. But I think the touch points here are clear, Deputy Minister, in the need for Black women in this country.
Yeah, I think the starting point is to really say, yes, we still have to say Happy Women's Day, because that is not about us. With regard to economic inclusion, government has put in place so many policies which are meant to ensure, to fast track the inclusion of those who were left out before. Now we're talking about a district development model where we say that's where we should locate our projects, our opportunities, and so on, so that those women who don't come any closer to any business association are not left behind. The question is, what do we do differently so as to ensure that those women in rural areas at a district level are assisted to enter areas like agribusiness, the whole ecosystem, and to give them that sense of hope that much as the progress has been slow, but there's a determination, there's a political will, there's a commitment to make sure that they come out of the circumstances they find themselves in.
I like that. I like that the common thread is hope. I said that you were the beacon of hope for Ntombi. Are you hopeful, just based on, the landscape that the Deputy Minister has painted?
For me personally, hope is a very disempowering concept, because what are you going to hope for? It has to move beyond hope. And I'm glad the Minister has very clearly alluded to the policy framework, the district devolution model. And in your previous panel, it was very clearly outlined. The challenge is not around getting policies and regulations in place. We have it all in place. So the big bad wolf in South Africa at the moment is procurement, because procurement is the single most powerful lever to unlock potential and opportunities for women. And all along our roads leading to Zimbabwe, leading to Mozambique, leading to Botswana, those roads tell you the picture of how women trade in the informal sector. And so at the BBC, we are very clear around the development of township and rural economies, village economies. Is it not ironic that we could have and we should have used COVID to completely re-engineer our supply chain and our enterprise development, so that when we talked about deep cleaning of schools, when we talked about the provision of masks, gloves, etc., in villages and in townships, Why is it that we did not provide opportunities at that level for township women? This is the opportunity. There's no rocket science. It doesn't require us to redo anything. It just requires us to get rid of feeding the bad wolf. Do you know? I mean, I am flabbergasted that the Central Supplier Database only procured to the tune of 35 billion from black business, out of a total spend of, guess what, 1.2 trillion. Now, when you disaggregate the 53 billion, we cannot get a sex disaggregated number. So I know I'm getting very emotional, and I was told to be calm on this interview, but it's very hard to be calm.
You're passionate, and that's fine.
I'm slightly angry. You know, we don't have collateral as black women. So the collateral is cash. Put cash in our hands, because cash feeds our children. Cash educates our children, because the public service facilities don't work. And Ntombi needs a public service that works for her and all the other Ntombis in this country. It requires a deliberate resolve to say, we are going to feed the good wolf.
What is your
I'm
message?
going to calm down now.
Thank you, Judy. What is your message to the Ntombis and everybody watching today, Deputy Minister?
I think we all agree. Government is the biggest supplier of goods in any country. The question is, I think, taking from what Judy is saying, how do we ensure that we move beyond having policies that accommodate women, youth, and persons with disability, but that in action we deliberately ensure that the actual opportunities are allocated to women directly? I need to emphasize there is a commitment and a political will to ensure that we use the next decade for greater impact and for an equal future.
I think Ms. Mazibuko said it well as well, the change agents. We are those change agents, from passion to a woman who has endured pain, our gender-based violence survivor and activist who has requested to remain anonymous, digs deep as she shares with us her moment of pain.
Mine okwenzeka kimi okwangivisa ubuhlungu ene bengingaboni leso sikhathi, ngangihlala nobaba umntwana am-abuser kabuhlungu, ngithula ende ngoba bengingazi ukuthi ngizokushonaphi, ngithula ende ngoba bek-abuse umntwana lona, mina ngibona ukuthi akangibeki isandla, akangishayi, bengingakuboni ukuthi kuyinkinga ngalamanye amagama. Athi noma ambethile umntwana, amshaye kabuhlungu, ngimbona ukuthi umntwana akasi-right, ngingathathi action ngoba angazi ukuthi ngizokwenzani, angazi ukuthi ngizokushonaphi. Ngibekezela konke lokho, umntwana abethwa, ahlukunyezwa, athukwa, nami angithuka, ngibiza ngawo onke amagama, aphinza athi nathi uyagcolisa, ngingabi nenkinga ngoba ngingazi ukuthi ngizokuyaphi, ngoba ngesikhathi isimo sokuhlupheka siyakwenza. Ngibonga ukuthi ukukhanya sengikubonile ukuthi ngingavumeli ukubekezelela into engasi-right. Ngamane ngilale ngingakahle kunekuthi ngibekezelele kuhlupheka. Kubuhlungu ukuswela, ene nesikhathi nawuswela uthola nemindeni lonayo eceleni ikujikela ingasakufuni, ugcine wena ngasikhathi shoti ngwele okuthengisa ngomntwana, enesigcino umntwana wenzani leso sikhathi, ugcine uyakuzonda. Kubuhlungu kona, but ngibonga ukuthi ngigcine sengiyibonile into leyo, ngabe sesengiyaphuma lapha, ngakhona ukuthi ngizizamele nami, ngibone ukuthi ngibone ukuthi ngihlanganisa njani ukuthi umntwana abe right.
We salute our gender-based violence activist and survivor for the bravery it took to share with us all her story today. Deputy Minister, a story we've heard today, but a story that we continue hearing in South Africa about the constant abuse of women and children.
Siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi umama ukwazile ukuthi aphuze amanzi akhulume ngento edlule kuyo, ngoba izosiza omama abaningi. kuhle umuntu asukume azimele. Ngamanye amagama, njengalabo omama baka 1956, kumele umuntu asukume alwe, azifune ukuthi ubani, afune ukuthi yini angazenzela yona. Kodwa into enhle futhi ukuthi nohulumente wethu uningi asekubekile emphakathini kokusiza umama osefuna ukusukuma. Njengalezi zindawo abakwazi ukuthi basuswe bayohlala kuzo, ziyasiza ngoba umuntu upholisa ikhanda, uba nesikhathi sokuyicabanga kahle lento ukuthi ngizophuma kanjani kuyo, yini engazenzela yona. Ngokwami-ke ngibone ngathi masikhuthaze omama abaningi ukuthi uma uhlukumezwa, ukuthula kuyokucindezela nokwedlula. Into enkulu ukuthi ukhulume, into enkulu ukuthi ufune usizo. Nama-police station wethu manje awasekho lapha bekhona izolo, abebefika bangavumi nokuvula icase bethi hayi umkhwenyana wakho. Upresident wethu wathi ngisho ama-cases ayingathathwanga kudala mawavulwe. Sokukuningi-ke osekubekiwe nje uhulumeni kokulwa nalolu dlame esikhuluma ngalo. Kumele thina sisukume singabomama nentsha yethu nobaba, njengoba nabo baba basukumile kakhulu bathi akuzukwenzeka lento egameni labo.
We have heard from our panelists, and they have indeed highlighted a myriad of issues that affect the women today and also have potential to hinder their development if not addressed. The discussion opens up dialogues on how we, as a nation, government, and relevant organizations, advance the realization of women's rights for an equal future. I will now usher the platform to the President himself during these difficult times to deliver the 2020 Women's Day keynote address.
Women of South Africa, on this Women's Day, I greet you, the inheritors of the noble legacy of the women of 1956. 64 years ago, our mothers, daughters, sisters, and grandmothers, and great-grandmothers stood defiant and proud, united in their demand to live in freedom. They stood not for themselves alone, but for the rights of the generations of women yet to come. This day provides all of us with an opportunity to reflect on the road we have traveled as a nation since then. As a country, we have made much progress that we can be proud of. We have made gains in advancing women's rights, in broadening women's access to education, in the provision of health care and social support to women, and in improving their participation in the economy and decision-making. At the same time, we know that the lived reality for millions of South African women is very different to the promise that is contained in our Constitution. We know that millions of South African women still live in conditions of poverty and unemployment. They face discrimination and violence all the time. To give effect to our commitment to the upliftment of women, South Africa has joined Generation Equality, a global campaign to achieve gender equality by 2030. As part of this campaign, we are part of two action coalitions, one on economic justice and rights, and the other on gender-based violence and femicide. These action coalitions mobilize governments, civil society, and the private sector for collective action. They give us an opportunity to work with other world leaders to achieve real change in the lives of women across the globe. As we mark Women's Day this year, South Africa is in the grip of two pandemics, the coronavirus pandemic and the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. Ever more women and children are being abused and losing their lives at the hands of men. It cannot be that this Women's Day is drenched in the tears of families who have lost their sisters, their daughters, and mothers to violence that is perpetrated by South African men. This cannot continue. We can no longer, as a nation, ignore the deafening cries of women and children for protection, for help, and for justice. It has been 11 months since I addressed a joint sitting of Parliament to announce an emergency response action plan to combat gender-based violence and femicide. Since then, we have taken concrete actions to provide greater support and care to survivors of gender-based violence. We have increased the number of shelters and care centers for survivors and improved the capacity of our police to deal with the crimes of gender-based violence. We have made important progress in reforming our laws to give greater protection to survivors of domestic and sexual violence. We now also have a national strategic plan, which, among other things, aims to promote women's economic inclusion. One of the most important ways to reduce the vulnerability of women to gender-based violence is to enable them to become financially independent. With the launch of Generation Equality and with the implementation of the National Strategic Plan, we have a unique opportunity to refashion our society and the lives of the women of our country. We have an opportunity to build a country in which women's rights to dignity, to security, to safety, and to protection is not negotiable. It requires bold and measurable actions by government, civil society, the private sector, and all actors for meaningful change. Today, we commit to a new social compact with the women of this country, informed by our collective commitment to gender equality. This will be driven by bold actions. The first action is to expand the access of women to economic opportunities. We will do this, amongst other things, by setting aside up to 40% of public procurement for women-owned businesses. We now expect national departments in government to monitor and to report on how many women have participated in each public procurement process. They will have to develop clear plans on how they will broaden women's participation over the next 12 months. As the chair of the African Union, we will also be working on policy guidelines to help member states on our continent to develop similar interventions. The second action is to support women who operate small and micro businesses, including those who operate in the informal sector. Lack of access to financial services, as well as digital identification, tends to limit the participation of women and their ability to conduct business. Under Generation Equality, we will be supporting African Union member states in their drive to adopt digital IDs. We will engage the financial sector to strengthen efforts to make financial services accessible and affordable for women in South Africa. The third action is to speed up the process of giving women access to productive assets, such as land. We will ensure that our own land reform process favors all historically disadvantaged people, including women, in getting land and the means to farm it. Of the 75 million rand in COVID-19 relief earmarked for farming input vouchers, 53% of the beneficiaries will be rural women. We must ensure that women, subsistence, and small-scale farmers continue to receive support beyond the lockdown that we are going through now. At the same time, we will be calling on the African Union member states to put policies in place to increase women's ownership of land to 30%. Our fourth action is to ensure that women are safe from gender-based violence in the workplace. Through generation equality, we will work at a national and regional level towards the ratification of the International Labour Organization Convention on Violence and Harassment in the Workplace. The urgency of achieving gender equality has never been greater than now. The coronavirus has left none of us untouched, but it is those who already face economic insecurity, poverty, discrimination, and exclusion who have been hardest hit. To support the fight against gender-based violence, the Solidarity Fund has approved a 17 million rand project to expand shelter services and support the network of Tutuzela care centers. A portion of this funding will also go towards capacitating the Gender-Based Violence Command Center to ensure women are not made more vulnerable during the lockdown. We have put mechanisms in place, not just for social support, but also to help women-owned businesses. Of the 12.6 million people who have received social grants during the month of June, 10.5 or 83% were women who are aged 16 years and older. As of this week, about 1.4 million South African women have received the special COVID-19 social relief of distress grant. The food parcels distributed through the Department of Social Development and the Solidarity Fund have reached just over 1 million families, among them women-headed families. In the second round of food relief, the fund will distribute this month in the form of vouchers. Some 40 to 50% of the target beneficiaries will be women. COVID-19 relief is also being provided to women-owned SMMEs through our development finance institutions. For example, of the total number of SMMEs benefiting from the Debt Relief Finance Scheme, 33% are women-owned businesses. The Industrial Development Corporation, the IDC, has also directed a significant portion of its funding approvals to supporting youth and women-empowered businesses. We have prioritized Black-owned and women-owned businesses in the procurement of personal protective equipment. There has been a number of success stories of women either starting businesses to produce personal protective equipment or modifying existing business operations. We are deeply concerned about the corruption that has marred our national effort to make PPEs accessible to our hard-working social and health workers. We expect the law enforcement agencies to find the culprits and ensure they face the full might of the law. This pandemic has demonstrated our ability to support the greater economic participation of women in real terms. This good work must not end when the pandemic is over. We must maintain the momentum. The generation of 1956 mobilized, organized, and stood firm in their demands for their rights to be respected. The women who, in the recent past, have taken to the streets demanding an end to gender-based violence and femicide carry forward the flame of that struggle that the mothers, the sisters of 1956 embarked upon. Under generation equality, we want to see women's full empowerment achieved by this generation within a generation. This is our responsibility as a nation. It is our goal. If we each play our part, we can make this happen. The time for talk is over. This is now the time for action. I wish all the women of South Africa a happy Women's Day. I thank you, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for your intriguing address. It's comforting and also such a relief for us women to hear encouraging and assuring words from the President, especially during these difficult times exacerbated by the pandemic. Women's circumstances have been made worse, not only financially, but some are not feeling safe, confined in their homes. It has been great listening to the President touch on the sub-themes raised by our panelists earlier and endorsing the women's agenda. I'd like to reiterate that it has been a privilege to moderate a panel of women who have taken over the baton from the women of yesteryear and continue to advance issues of women for equality and equity in the 21st century South Africa. With consistency and tenacity, we shall certainly realize women's rights for the development of our country. We've come to the end of our program, and I will emphasize that it is every citizen's responsibility to work hard towards realizing women's safety, development, and ensure women enjoy their basic rights in their country. We can indeed then be a generation equality practically, not only on the constitutional document. In our closing virtual program for 2020 Women's Day commemoration, more beautiful performances by beautiful Mzansi women will follow. From me, Romy Titus, have a happy Women's Day.
Women of Africa are strong. I'm a Corsica, say Africa, Hanamanda. Women of Africa belong. I'm a Corsica, say Africa, Hanamanda. Women of, women of, women of, women of Africa, women of, women of, women of, women of Africa. The time has come to stand as one. I'm a Corsica, say Africa, Anamanda. A brand new future has begun. I'm a Corsica, say Africa, Anamanda. Women of, women of, women of, women of Africa, women of, women of, women of, women of Africa, women around the world. We stand as one. Together we can show just what can be done. Your woman carrying waves, and we need you. Your strength and dignity will carry us through. Women of Abafazi banamandla. Abafazi banamandla. Happy Women's Day, my sisters. What can I say? We found ourselves living in a strange, strange world this 2020. But this is our month, and together we will carve another deep groove in women's rights in South Africa. I wish all of you the best Women's Day, and let us stay together where our voices are being heard, and may they be heard louder and louder. We have been given this incredible platform from those women who marched on the Union buildings in 1956, led by Sophia de Bruyn. And what can I say? As the young people come up, they are being heard, they're being stronger. And whilst we are amidst a crisis with women abuse and gender-based violence, we must not forget that we, abafazi banamandla, wabathinta bafazi, wabathinta bagoto, never forget. Women of Africa.
Yes,